Chapter 6. The following morning, both Elias and Adrian stood by the main gate to see Keith off. The courtyard was already alive with movement. Soldiers preparing for drills, servants passing quietly between duties, but the air between the three of them remained light. At least for one of them. Keith, entirely oblivious to the previous night's tension, looked thoroughly pleased with himself. "I would be honored to host you, Lord Elias," he said cheerfully, adjusting his gloves. "You must visit my estate sometime, preferably with your husband, so I don't get accused of stealing you away." Elias blinked at the teasing tone before offering a polite nod. "Yes, Marquis. Thank you." Adrian's expression remained composed, though there was the faintest tightening at the corner of his eyes. "Take care on your journey," Adrian said, stepping forward. Keith grinned. "What? No heartfelt farewell? I'm wounded." Despite the complaint, he stepped into Adrian's brief embrace, returning it with a firm clap on his back. "Try not to get swallowed by court politics before I visit again," Keith added under his breath. Adrian huffed lightly. "Just go." With a final wave, Keith mounted his horse and rode out through the gates, leaving behind a trail of dust and a silence that settled far heavier than before. Adrian returned to his study soon after. The quiet of the room felt familiar, grounding. Papers were stacked neatly across his desk, reports waiting to be reviewed, decisions waiting to be made, something he could control. He reached for the account books and began going through them, his focus sharp. First, nothing seemed unusual. Then, his brows furrowed. He flipped a page, then another. Everything was in order. Not just in order meticulously so. Payments cleared. Allocations balanced. Pending matters resolved. Adrian leaned back slightly, the faintest hint of surprise crossing his face. He rang the bell. Moments later, Benjamin entered. The older man took one look at the ledger in Adrian's hand and smiled knowingly. "I see you've noticed." Adrian closed the book slowly. "Explain." Benjamin clasped his hands behind his back. "While you were at the border, I guided Lord Elias through the estate's responsibilities," he said. "He learned quickly, faster than I expected, if I'm being honest." A small pause. "He didn't just follow instructions, Your Grace. He understood them." Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to the ledger again. "There were matters requiring immediate attention," Benjamin continued. "He handled them without hesitation, carefully, thoughtfully." A faint warmth stirred somewhere in Adrian's chest. Unexpected, quiet. "I believe," Benjamin added gently, "that you should speak with him directly." Adrian nodded after a moment. "Send him in." Benjamin inclined his head. "Of course." A few minutes later, a soft knock sounded at the door. "Yes, come in." Elias stepped inside. The moment he entered, the faint scent of orchid followed. Lighter than before, softer in the daylight, but unmistakable. Adrian noticed it immediately. Elias's gaze fell to the account book in Adrian's hand, and tension crept visibly into his posture. I'm sorry," Elias began, his voice careful. "If I made any mistakes, You didn't." The interruption was calm, but firm. Elias stilled. Adrian set the ledger down. "I reviewed everything. You did well." Silence. Elias blinked, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, he didn't seem to know how to respond. "I only followed Benjamin's instructions," he said quietly. "And I apologize if I overstepped. Some matters required immediate decisions, so You handled them," Adrian finished. Elias nodded hesitantly. Adrian studied him, then really looked this time. There was tension in Elias's shoulders, a faint tightness in his expression, as though he were bracing for criticism that never came, even now. "Elias," Adrian said, his tone softer than before. "Sit." Elias obeyed without question, taking the seat across from him. Instead of returning to his own chair, Adrian walked around the desk and leaned lightly against its edge. Closer now. Closer than necessary. I owe you an apology, Adrian said. Elias looked up sharply. For yesterday. The words hung between them. Elias's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across his face before he lowered his gaze. I'm sorry as well, he murmured. A brief silence followed. Adrian exhaled slowly. It seems we are both lacking in communication. A faint, almost self-conscious smile touched Elias's lips, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Yes, he said softly. It seems that way. He hesitated. Then, as if gathering courage, he continued. Since I was a child, I've admired Marquis Keith. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. He is an Omega. Elias went on, his voice steady despite the vulnerability beneath it. And of common birth, yet he rose through merit, through ability. People respect him, not out of obligation, but because he earned it. His fingers curled slightly in his lap. I didn't know you were close to him. There was a pause, a longer one this time. Elias looked down, clearly debating whether to continue. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. I know I may be overstepping, he said, and I understand if this is not my place to say. Adrian didn't move, didn't interrupt, but his attention was entirely fixed on him now. Elias drew in a small breath. But I wish you would look at me more. The words landed softly, but their weight was undeniable. For a moment, Adrian simply stared at him, caught off guard in a way he hadn't been in a long time. Elias didn't look up. I don't expect, he continued, struggling slightly now, anything unreasonable. I know our marriage is circumstantial, political. His voice steadied again, though quieter. But when you speak to him, you're different. Adrian's chest tightened faintly. More open, Elias added. More present. Silence stretched between them. I don't mind that he is important to you, Elias said. But I would like. He stopped, then forced himself to finish. I would like to matter as well. That did it. Something in Adrian shifted. Subtle, but real. He pushed himself off the desk and took a step closer. Elias. Elias finally looked up. There was no accusation in his eyes, just honesty, and something fragile beneath it. Adrian wasn't used to this, to being asked not for power, not for protection, but for attention, for presence. I didn't realize, Adrian admitted slowly, and for once, he meant it. Elias, Adrian called softly. Elias looked up this time. A faint flush had spread across his cheeks, the delicate scent of fresh orchids drifting from him. Subtle, yet enough to draw Adrian in without effort. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between them until he was standing within Elias's space. Too close to be accidental, too close to ignore. Elias's breath hitched. Adrian leaned in, just enough that their faces were only a breath apart. Their eyes met. Something had changed. Gone was the earlier hesitation, the guarded distance. In its place, something softer, warmer, unspoken but undeniable. Adrian's voice dropped, quieter than before. May I? Elias swallowed. His throat felt dry all of a sudden, his pulse quickening in a way he couldn't control. Heat crept up his neck, settling into his skin. Without realizing it, he ran his tongue lightly over his lips. The small, unconscious movement did not go unnoticed. Adrian's gaze darkened, just slightly. Elias nodded. Barely. But it was enough. Adrian closed the distance. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, almost questioning, as if giving Elias time to pull away. He didn't. Instead, Elias leaned in, just a little, and that was all it took. The hesitation dissolved. The kiss deepened, slowly at first, then with growing urgency. as if both of them had been holding back far longer than they realized. Adrian's hand found Elias's waist, steadying him. Elias's fingers curled lightly into the fabric of Adrian's coat, gripping without thinking. They moved, almost unconsciously, until Elias's back met the sofa. Adrian followed, bracing himself just enough to avoid putting his full weight on him, but not enough to create distance. The space between them disappeared entirely. The more they kissed, the more something restless stirred beneath the surface. Something neither of them fully understood, but neither wanted to stop. Elias's breathing grew uneven. Adrian's control slipped, piece by piece. At some point, neither of them could tell when their positions shifted. Adrian sank onto the sofa. And Elias ended up in his lap. For a brief moment they paused, not breaking apart completely, just enough to breathe, to realize, to feel the closeness in a different way now. Elias's hands rested against Adrian's shoulders, his grip uncertain, as if he didn't quite know what to do next. Adrian's arm remained around his waist, steady, grounding, their foreheads nearly touched, breath mingling. The world outside the room felt distant, irrelevant, and for the first time since their marriage, there was no distance left between them. Elias's breath trembled. Being this close was overwhelming. Adrian's hand tightened slightly at his waist, almost unconsciously, as if grounding himself, or holding Elias in place. The scent of orchid grew stronger. Too strong. Adrian's control faltered. His head dipped, his lips brushing against Elias's again. But this time there was nothing hesitant about it. The kiss deepened instantly, heat replacing restraint, urgency threading through every movement. Elias gasped softly against him. That was all it took. Something in Adrian snapped. His grip firmed, pulling Elias closer than before, until there was no space left between them at all. The warmth of Elias's body, the soft hitch of his breathing, the way he leaned in without resistance. It was too much. The scent, the closeness, him. Adrian's instincts stirred. Sharp, possessive, unfamiliar in their intensity. His hand slid up Elias's back, pressing him closer, as if afraid he might disappear if he let go. Elias. His voice came out rougher than intended. Elias shivered at the sound of his name. His fingers tightened in Adrian's coat, no longer tentative now, but clinging. His head dipped instinctively toward Adrian's shoulder, breath warm against his neck. That scent. Adrian's jaw clenched. He turned slightly, his lips brushing dangerously close to Elias's collar, close enough to feel the heat of his skin beneath the fabric. Elias stilled, not pulling away, if anything leaning in. A quiet, breathless sound escaped him. Adrian's restraint was hanging by a thread. Just one more second, one more movement, and he knew he wouldn't stop. A sharp knock echoed through the room. Both of them froze. The sound cut through everything, like cold water. Reality came crashing back. Adrian pulled away immediately, too quickly, as if burned. Elias blinked, disoriented, his breath still uneven, his hands lingering where they had been moments before. The distance felt wrong, abrupt. Your Grace. Benjamin's voice came from the other side of the door. Adrian turned his head slightly, eyes closing for a brief moment as he forced his breathing to steady. Yes, he replied, his voice controlled again, but just barely. There is a matter that requires your attention. A pause. Adrian exhaled slowly. I'll be there shortly. Footsteps faded away. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same. Not anymore. Elias shifted slightly, suddenly aware of where he was. Still seated in Adrian's lap. The realization hit all at once. His face flushed deeper. He moved to stand, but Adrian's hand caught his wrist again. Not forceful, just enough to stop him. Elias looked up. Adrian's expression had changed. The intensity was still there, but restrained now, locked behind something colder, controlled, careful. "We should stop," Adrian said quietly. The words felt heavier than they should have. Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Adrian released him. This time Elias stepped back fully. The distance between them returned. But it felt different now. Charged. Unresolved. Elias lowered his gaze briefly, gathering himself. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. His steps were steady, but not as steady as before. Adrian remained where he was, sitting on the sofa, hands still half raised from where he had held Elias moments ago. His jaw tightened. The faint scent of orchid still lingered in the air, and it was driving him insane. That's it for today's video. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to show your support. We'll be back soon with the next chapter. Have a good day.